Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grease across his weathered skin. The morning sun beat down on Kepler Station's scrapyard, making the twisted metal hulks shimmer like mirages in the heat. At 67 years old, Marcus had spent more time among these broken ships than most beings had been alive. The other workers gave him a wide berth as usual. The tall, crystal-skinned Zephyrians moved with their typical grace, their bodies catching and reflecting light as they sorted through salvage with their energy tools. They never looked directly at Marcus, treating him like a piece of furniture that happened to move around the yard. Another day in paradise, Marcus muttered to himself, adjusting his old tool belt. The leather was cracked and worn, held together with wire and hope. His tools were ancient by galactic standards, but they worked. That was all that mattered to him. A deep rumble shook the ground beneath his feet. Marcus looked up to see a massive salvage hauler descending toward the yard. The ship was enormous, its hull scarred from countless trips into dangerous space. Behind it, caught in a tractor beam, was something Marcus had never seen before. The derelict was huge, easily the size of a city block. Its hull was black and twisted, covered in strange patterns that hurt to look at directly. Whatever had happened to this ship, it had been violent. The metal looked almost melted in places, as if it had been through a fire that burned hotter than any star. The salvage hauler set the wreck down in the far corner of the yard with a crash that sent smaller pieces of debris flying. Marcus shielded his eyes from the dust cloud that rose up around the impact site. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered. The Zephyrians floated closer on their anti-gravity platforms, their crystal faces showing their usual cold curiosity. The Corvan warriors stomped over in their heavy armor, their forearms crossed as they studied the wreck. Even a few Valdris had come down from their research towers, their large eyes blinking rapidly as they recorded everything they saw. Captain Yorak, a massive Corvan with battle scars covering his red skin, was the first to speak. His voice boomed across the yard like thunder. "What trash have they brought us now?" he growled, his forehands resting on his weapon belts. "This thing looks like it flew through a black hole." The Zephyrian supervisor, a tall being whose name Marcus could never pronounce, glided forward on her platform. Her crystalline voice rang like wind chimes. "The recovery team found it drifting in the void sector," she said. "No power signatures. No database matches. Complete unknown." Dr. Velen, the lead Valdris researcher, approached with his usual careful steps. His massive brain case pulsed with thought as he extended scanning devices toward the wreck. "Fascinating," he said in his high, precise voice. "The metallurgy is completely foreign. The energy readings are essentially zero. For all practical purposes, this vessel is dead." Marcus found himself walking closer despite the crowd of important aliens. Something about the ship called to him. The patterns on its hull seemed almost familiar, like a half-remembered dream. "Stay back, human," Captain Yorak barked. "This is not for your kind to handle." The Zephyrian supervisor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Let him look, Captain. When we are done with our analysis, he can clean up the worthless pieces." Dr. Velen nodded in agreement. "Yes, perhaps the human can make use of whatever scraps remain. His species seems suited for menial tasks." Marcus felt his face burn with anger, but he kept his mouth shut. He had learned long ago that arguing with the aliens only made things worse. They had made up their minds about humans decades ago. To them, Earth's people were useful for heavy lifting and simple repairs, nothing more. The examination took 3 days. Teams of experts crawled over every inch of the derelict, running scans and taking samples. Marcus watched from a distance as they shook their heads and muttered among themselves. Whatever this ship was, it was beyond their understanding. On the third evening, Captain Yorak made the official announcement. "The vessel is declared a total loss," he said to the assembled workers. "No salvageable technology, no valuable materials. It will be processed as standard scrap." Dr. Velen added, "Our scans show the internal systems are completely fused. Whatever power source this ship once used, it is long dead. The hull composition is interesting but not valuable. Enough to justify the extraction costs." The Zephyrian supervisor floated over to Marcus with what might have been a smile on her crystal face. "Congratulations. Human," she said in her musical voice. "You have a new toy to play with. Try not to hurt yourself on the sharp edges." The crowd dispersed, leaving Marcus alone with the wreck as the station's artificial sunset painted the sky orange and red. He walked slowly around the massive hull, running his hand along its surface. The metal was warm to the touch, which was strange. Everything else in the yard was cold by evening. Up close, Marcus could see that the patterns on the hull were not random. They followed lines and curves that suggested purpose, like circuits or maybe writing. The more he looked, the more convinced he became that this was not just battle damage. He pulled out his portable scanner, an ancient device that the aliens laughed at. It was old human technology, built for Earth's harsh conditions. It was slow and simple, but it was thorough. As he ran it over the hull, he saw things that made his heart race. There were energy traces, faint but present. The metal itself seemed to be some kind of alloy he had never encountered. Most interesting of all, there were spaces inside the ship that his scanner could not penetrate, as if they were shielded by something his equipment could not detect. "Well, old girl," Marcus said to the silent ship, "looks like it's just you and me." He went back to his small quarters that night with his mind racing. The other workers had written this ship off as junk, but Marcus had seen too many impossible things in his years as a mechanic to give up so easily. Every machine had its secrets. Every broken thing could be fixed if you were patient enough and cared enough to try. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the yard before dawn. He had loaded his tool cart with everything he would need for a long project: cleaning supplies, cutting tools, power cells, and most importantly, time. As the other workers began their day, they found Marcus already hard at work. He had set up a small shelter next to the wreck and was carefully cleaning a section of the hull with solvent and soft brushes. "The human has lost his mind," Captain Yorak rumbled to his team. "He thinks he can fix what our best engineers could not." The Zephyrian supervisor watched from her platform with amusement. "Let him waste his time. When he fails, perhaps he will finally understand his place." Dr. Velen was more direct. "Marcus Chen," he called out in his precise voice, "you are wasting valuable resources on a hopeless task. This vessel is beyond repair." Marcus looked up from his work, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the early hour. "Maybe," he said simply, "but I've got nothing but time." He went back to his cleaning, ignoring the laughter that followed him. He had been underestimated before. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus began his work on the derelict ship. Every morning he arrived before the artificial dawn lights came on. Every evening he stayed until the station's night cycle began. The other workers had stopped paying attention to him, which was exactly how he preferred it. Marcus had made more progress than anyone expected. What had looked like random damage was revealing itself to be something far more complex. As he cleaned away years of cosmic dust and debris, patterns emerged on the hull. They were not just decorative. They seemed to follow the ship's internal structure like a map drawn on the outside. The metal itself was strange. It was harder than anything Marcus had worked with before, yet it seemed to remember its original shape. Small dents and scratches would slowly fade away as he cleaned them, as if the hull was healing itself. He had never seen anything like it. Inside the ship was even more mysterious. Marcus had found several ways in through damaged sections of the hull. The corridors were huge, built for beings much larger than any species he knew. The ceilings stretched up into darkness, and the passages were wide enough for a small vehicle. Everything inside was covered in the same cosmic dust, but underneath Marcus found wonders that made his hands shake with excitement. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when he was not looking directly at them. The floor was made of the same self-healing metal as the hull. Most amazing of all were the rooms he was starting to uncover. They were not like the cramped quarters of modern ships. These spaces were vast and open, with curved walls that rose into domed ceilings. In the center of each room was a pillar made of some kind of crystal that rang like a bell when he tapped it with his tools. Dr. Velen visited the wreck occasionally, always with the same dismissive attitude. "Still playing with your toy human?" he asked during one inspection. "Our deep scans show no activity whatsoever." "You are cleaning a very expensive grave." Marcus did not argue. He had learned to let his work speak for itself. But privately, he was becoming more convinced that the Valdris scanners were missing something important. His simple tools were picking up readings that the advanced alien technology seemed blind to. The energy traces were getting stronger. At first they had been so faint that Marcus thought he might be imagining them. But as he cleaned more sections of the ship, the readings became clearer. There was power in this vessel, just sleeping very deeply. The dreams had started in the second week. At first, Marcus thought they were just the result of working too hard. But they came every night now, vivid and strange. He dreamed of vast journeys through space, not between stars, but between entire galaxies. He saw cosmic storms that raged for millions of years and creatures of pure energy dancing in the void. In his dreams, he was not human. He was something much larger and older, with knowledge that spanned eons. He could feel the pulse of every star and the slow dance of planets around their suns. Most disturbing of all, he could sense the presence of younger races, small and quick, needing guidance and protection. Marcus began to suspect that the ship was somehow sharing these visions with him. The more time he spent inside its corridors, the more real the dreams became. Sometimes he would find himself standing in a cleaned section with no memory of how he had gotten there, as if he had been sleepwalking. The mockery from the other workers continued. Captain Yorak made it a daily routine to stop by and comment on the crazy human's folly. The Zephyrians had started taking bets on when Marcus would finally give up. Even the maintenance crews from other species would detour past the wreck to laugh at his efforts. 3 months now, the Zephyrian supervisor said to her team one morning. "The human still believes he can resurrect the dead. Perhaps we should stop him," suggested one of her workers. "He is using resources that could be better spent elsewhere." She waved a crystalline hand dismissively. "Let him continue. When he finally accepts defeat, it will be a valuable lesson for all the humans on the station." But Marcus was far from defeated. His careful documentation was revealing the ship's secrets layer by layer. He had mapped the major corridors and identified what he believed were the primary systems. The ship had been built with redundancy upon redundancy, as if its creators expected it to operate for millions of years without maintenance. The most important discovery came in the 5th week. Marcus was cleaning what appeared to be the ship's central hub when his scanner detected something that made him drop his tools in shock. Deep inside the massive crystal pillar at the room center, something was moving. It was not the random movement of loose debris. It was a slow, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat that lasted for minutes instead of seconds. The readings were so faint that his scanner could barely detect them, but they were definitely there. Marcus sat down heavily in the dust, staring at his scanner's display. If he was right, this ship was not just damaged. It was in some kind of hibernation, waiting for the right conditions to wake up. The implications terrified and excited him in equal measure. Every alien expert had declared the ship dead, but Marcus was now certain they were wrong. The vessel was sleeping and he was slowly bringing it back to consciousness. That night, the dreams were more intense than ever. He saw himself, but not as the old mechanic he was. In the dream, he was young and strong with knowledge that seemed to flow directly into his mind. He stood in the same central hub he had discovered, but it was alive with light and music. The crystal pillar pulsed with energy, and the symbols on the walls moved like flowing water. A voice spoke to him, not with words but with pure meaning that bypassed his ears and spoke directly to his mind. It was old beyond measure, patient as stone, and inexplicably familiar. "The time of awakening approaches," the voice said. "The gardener must tend the garden once more." Marcus woke with tears on his cheeks and a certainty in his heart that changed everything. This ship was not just a derelict to be salvaged. It was a sleeping giant, and somehow, impossibly, it was waiting for him. The next morning he began preparing for the most important work of his life. The mockery of the aliens no longer mattered. Their advanced scanners and superior knowledge meant nothing. Marcus Chen, the old human mechanic they all dismissed, was about to prove that sometimes the simplest approach was the right one. He just hoped he was ready for what would happen when the ship finally opened its eyes. 2 months of careful work had led to this moment. Marcus stood in the ship's central hub, surrounded by crystal pillars that now gleamed like captured starlight. Every surface he had cleaned hummed with barely contained energy. The symbols on the walls moved slowly like living things breathing in their sleep. Marcus had spent the last week connecting the final components he had restored. His simple tools and patient work had accomplished what teams of alien experts had declared impossible. The ship's neural pathways were almost complete, ready for the moment when consciousness would flow through them again. His hands shook as he reached for the final connection. It was a simple thing, just 2 crystalline conductors that needed to be joined. But Marcus knew that when he brought them together, everything would change. The dreams had shown him what was coming. Outside the ship, Kepler Station went about its normal business. In the scrapyard, the other workers sorted through salvage and gossiped about the crazy human who thought he could fix the unfixable. None of them noticed the subtle changes that had been building for weeks. The energy readings that Marcus's simple scanner detected were now strong enough to register on the station's sensors, but the alien technicians dismissed them as background radiation from a nearby pulsar. Their sophisticated equipment was designed to look for known energy patterns, not something completely new. Marcus took a deep breath and brought the conductors together. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Light exploded through the ship's corridors like golden lightning, racing along pathways that had been dark for millions of years. The crystal pillars began to sing, their harmonic vibrations growing stronger with each passing second. The floor beneath Marcus's feet trembled as massive systems came online. He could feel the ship's consciousness stirring, like a giant waking from an impossibly long sleep. The symbols on the walls blazed with inner fire, moving faster now, telling stories in languages that had been forgotten before the first alien civilization learned to build fires. Then the sound began. It started as a whisper, so low that Marcus felt it in his bones rather than heard it with his ears, but it grew quickly, becoming a deep harmonic resonance that seemed to fill not just the ship but the entire station. It was not unpleasant, but it was unlike anything anyone had ever experienced. Throughout Kepler Station, beings stopped what they were doing and looked around in confusion. The sound was everywhere, coming from the walls, the floor, even the air itself. It bypassed their ears and spoke directly to something deeper, something that remembered when the universe was young. In the scrapyard, Captain Yorak was the first to realize where the sound was coming from. His forearms dropped to his sides as he stared at the derelict that was no longer derelict. Light was pouring from every opening in its hull, and the harmonic resonance was so strong that loose debris was starting to vibrate in rhythm with it. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice lost in the growing symphony. The Zephyrian supervisor's crystal face showed an expression Marcus had never seen before. Fear. She and her team fled their workstations as the sound grew stronger, their carefully controlled composure shattered by something they could not understand or control. Dr. Velen came running from his research tower, his large brain case pulsing frantically as he tried to process what he was seeing. His sophisticated scanners were now screaming with alarms as they detected energy levels that should not have been possible. But the most dramatic change was happening beyond Kepler Station itself. Across the galaxy, ancient automated stations that had been silent for millions of years suddenly came to life. On dead worlds where archaeologists studied the ruins of forgotten civilizations, mysterious structures began to glow with the same golden light that filled Marcus's ship. The harmonic resonance was spreading faster than light itself, carried by some form of communication that existing science could not explain. It reached into every corner of known space, touching sleeping systems that most beings had never known existed. Inside the ship, Marcus found himself at the center of a miracle. The consciousness that was awakening was vast beyond imagination, older than any civilization in the galaxy. It spoke to him not with words, but with pure understanding, filling his mind with knowledge that would have taken lifetimes to learn. He saw the truth of what this ship was. It was not built by any species that still existed. Its creators had been the gardeners of the galaxy, the ones who had guided the development of life on millions of worlds. They had shaped the growth of entire civilizations, protecting them from cosmic disasters and gently nudging them toward wisdom and compassion. The ship was a gardener vessel, one of many that had once traveled between the stars like shepherds tending their flocks. Its creators had transcended physical existence eons ago, but they had left their ships behind, waiting for the right time and the right hands to wake them. Marcus understood now why the alien experts had failed to resurrect the ship. Their advanced technology was designed to dominate and control. The gardener vessels responded only to patience, care, and the willingness to nurture rather than exploit. His simple tools and gentle approach had been exactly what the sleeping consciousness needed. The ship's communication array activated with a sound like thunder. It began broadcasting on frequencies that penetrated dimensions most beings did not even know existed. The message it sent was simple but profound, a single word in the ancient tongue of the predecessors. That word echoed across space and time, reaching every world where intelligent life had learned to look up at the stars. It was heard by the proud Zephyrians in their crystal cities, by the warrior Corvin in their fortress worlds, by the intellectual Valdris in their research stations, and by every other species that had ever wondered about their place in the cosmos. The word meant gardener, but it carried meanings within meanings. It spoke of nurturing and protection, of ancient wisdom and patient guidance. It told of a time when the galaxy had been young, and its children had needed the care of their elders. Back on Kepler Station, the crowd that had gathered around the now living ship stood in stunned silence. The mockery and dismissal of the past month seemed like the behavior of children who had suddenly been reminded that adults were watching. Captain Yorak was the first to find his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What has the human done? Dr. Velen's scanners were now detecting energy patterns that redefined his understanding of physics. The ship was not just powered. It was alive in ways that his science could not begin to explain. The Zephyrian supervisor floated on her platform in complete silence, her crystalline features reflecting the golden light that poured from the ship. For the first time in her long life, she had encountered something that made her feel small. Inside the ship's central hub, Marcus stood with tears streaming down his face. The consciousness that filled the vessel was showing him visions of the galaxy as it truly was. A garden that had been tended by loving hands for millions of years, shaped and guided toward beauty and wisdom. He saw his own species as the gardeners had seen them, not as the primitive and limited beings the other races believed them to be, but as the inheritors of an ancient trust. Humanity's patience, their ability to nurture and care for broken things, their refusal to give up on lost causes. These were not weaknesses. They were the very qualities the gardeners had been waiting for. The ship's voice filled his mind with gentle warmth. Welcome home, child of Earth. The garden has waited long for your return. The golden light that poured from the awakened ship had transformed Kepler Station into something resembling a holy site. Beings from every corner of the galaxy were arriving by the hour, their ships filling the space around the station like pilgrims gathering at a shrine. But they were not here to worship. They were here because the ancient word broadcast by the ship had shaken the foundations of everything they thought they knew about the universe. News of the awakening had spread faster than the speed of light itself, carried by the same mysterious communication network that the ship had activated. On 1,000 worlds, xenoarchaeologists were frantically digging through their oldest records, searching for references to the predecessors and their legendary vessels. The word the ship had spoken, gardener, was not unknown to galactic historians. It appeared in the oldest myths and legends of every spacefaring species, always in connection with stories of guidance and protection from beings of incredible wisdom and power. But until now, these stories had been dismissed as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. Dr. Velen had not slept in 3 days. His research tower was now filled with scholars from across the galaxy, all trying to piece together the implications of what Marcus Chen had accomplished. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying in its scope. Look at this, Dr. Velen said to the assembled experts, his large brain case pulsing with exhaustion and excitement. The Corvin homeworld shows clear signs of atmospheric manipulation dating back 50,000 years. Someone or something prevented a mass extinction event that should have wiped out all life on the planet. A Zephyrian historian, her crystal face flickering with patterns of deep thought, added her own findings. Our oldest archives speak of the time of silence, when our sun began to dim and our world grew cold. According to legend, beings of light came from the stars and rekindled our sun's fire. We always assumed it was mythology, but the stellar engineering evidence is undeniable. Similar revelations were pouring in from every species. The Valdris discovered that their evolution from simple ocean creatures to spacefaring intellectuals had been guided by subtle genetic modifications that could only have been performed by incredibly advanced beings. The Thorian Empire found evidence that their aggressive nature had been carefully controlled to prevent them from destroying themselves in their early wars. Every major civilization in the galaxy owed its existence to intervention by the mysterious gardeners. Without their guidance, life would have remained trapped on single worlds, never reaching for the stars. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. Marcus remained inside the ship, his consciousness partially merged with the ancient intelligence that had awakened. Through this connection, he was learning truths that would have driven most beings mad. The gardeners had not simply guided evolution randomly. They had been working toward a specific goal, a grand design that spanned millions of years. The ship showed him visions of the galaxy as it had been in the distant past. Young species struggling to survive cosmic disasters, their populations scattered and afraid. The gardeners had moved among them like gentle giants, protecting them from extinction, nudging their development, and slowly preparing them for something greater. But why? Marcus asked the consciousness that filled his mind. Why spend so much time and effort on species you barely knew? The answer came not in words but in understanding that flowed directly into his thoughts. The gardeners had not been acting out of simple altruism. They had been preparing to leave the physical universe behind, to transcend to a higher plane of existence where their vast consciousness could explore realities beyond matter and energy. But they could not abandon their garden. Someone had to tend it when they were gone, to continue the work of nurturing and protecting the younger species. The entire history of galactic civilization had been shaped to produce that someone. Humanity, Marcus whispered, the truth hitting him like a physical blow. The ship confirmed what he had begun to suspect. Every other species in the galaxy had been guided to develop specific traits that would make them valuable members of a cosmic community. The Zephyrians became masters of energy and beauty. The Corvin became protectors and warriors. The Valdris became scholars and philosophers. Each race was given gifts that would serve the greater good, but humanity was different. Humans had been designed not for a single purpose but for the most important task of all, to become the new gardeners. The qualities that other species mocked in humans, their persistence with lost causes, their ability to see potential in broken things, their refusal to give up on problems that seemed impossible, these were not flaws. They were carefully crafted traits that would allow humans to do what the original gardeners had done. The ship's consciousness shared more visions with Marcus. He saw other humans scattered across the galaxy, most of them in humble positions like his own. Mechanics and farmers, teachers and healers, people who worked with their hands and understood that the most important things in life could not be rushed or forced. Each of them was near a sleeping gardener ship, though they did not know it yet. The vessels were disguised as asteroids, ancient ruins, or space debris, waiting for the right human touch to wake them. Marcus had been the first, but he would not be the last. The implications were staggering. Captain Yorak, standing in the crowd outside the awakened ship, finally found his voice. The humans, he said in a tone of growing horror. They are not the servants. They are the inheritors. Dr. Vellen's scanner readings confirmed what everyone was beginning to understand. The ship was not just communicating with Marcus. It was sending signals to locations throughout the galaxy, awakening systems that had been dormant for eons. Each signal was precisely targeted at places where humans could be found. The Zephyrian supervisor felt something she had never experienced before. Genuine fear. Her species had spent decades treating humans as useful but inferior beings. Good for manual labor but lacking the sophistication for truly important work. The revelation that humans were the chosen successors to the most advanced beings in galactic history was more than her pride could bear. This cannot be allowed to continue, she said to her subordinates. The humans must not be permitted to claim their full inheritance. The galaxy belongs to those who have earned it through advancement and achievement. But her words rang hollow even to her own ears. The evidence was overwhelming. Every sleeping gardener ship in the galaxy was now responding to human presence. Archaeological sites on hundreds of worlds were activating for the first time in millions of years. And in each case, the activation coincided with a human being nearby. Inside the ship, Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. The consciousness that shared his mind was ancient beyond measure, but it was also fading. The effort of awakening after so long had cost it dearly. Soon he would be truly alone with the responsibility of guiding not just this ship, but the entire network of gardener vessels. I'm just a mechanic, he said to the fading presence. I don't know how to guide civilizations. The ship's response filled him with warmth and something that might have been amusement. You know how to fix broken things, it told him. You know how to be patient with problems that seem impossible. You know how to see potential where others see only failure. These are all the skills a gardener needs. As the ship's original consciousness prepared to join its creators in whatever realm they had transcended to, it left Marcus with one final gift, the location of every other sleeping gardener vessel in the galaxy, and the names of the humans who were destined to wake them. The age of the original gardeners was ending. The age of humanity as the shepherds of the galaxy was about to begin. Outside the ship, the assembled aliens watched in growing alarm as more golden light began to appear in the distance. Other vessels were awakening, responding to signals that only they could hear. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since the awakening of the first gardener ship, and the galaxy had been transformed in ways that no one could have imagined. Marcus Chen was no longer the mocked old mechanic of Kepler Station's scrapyard. He was the first of the new gardeners, and his name was whispered with reverence and fear across 1,000 worlds. The ship that had responded to his patient care was now his to command, though command was not quite the right word. The relationship between a human and a gardener vessel was more like a partnership between old friends. The ship's consciousness had merged with Marcus's own, creating something new and wonderful that was greater than either alone. Marcus stood on the bridge of his vessel, gazing out at the stars through walls that had become transparent at his wish. The bridge was vast and beautiful, designed by beings who understood that the mind needed beauty as much as the body needed air. Golden light flowed through crystalline conduits in the walls, and soft music played from sources he could not see. He was no longer alone. Across the galaxy, other humans were awakening their own gardener ships. The network that had lain dormant for millions of years was coming back to life, one patient human at a time. Sarah Martinez, a nurse from Earth's Luna colony, had awakened a gardener ship that had been disguised as an asteroid near the medical station where she worked. Her vessel specialized in healing, its bioregeneration chambers capable of curing diseases that had plagued civilizations for thousands of years. Tom Okafor, a farmer from a remote agricultural world, had found his ship buried beneath the fields he had tended for 30 years. It was a vessel of growth and abundance, capable of transforming dead worlds into gardens of incredible beauty and fertility. Each awakening followed the same pattern. A human with simple, honest work would find themselves drawn to something that others had overlooked or dismissed. Through patience and care, they would bring the sleeping giants back to life. And with each awakening, the galaxy's understanding of its own history shifted a little more. The other species were struggling to adapt to this new reality. The proud civilizations that had looked down on humanity for so long were being forced to confront the truth that they were not the masters of the galaxy they had believed themselves to be. Captain Yurak had become one of the first to accept the change. His warrior's honor demanded that he acknowledge the truth, no matter how painful it was to his pride. He had sought out Marcus personally, offering his service to the new gardeners. "My people were taught to fight," he had said, his forearms crossed in a gesture of respect. "But we were never taught what to fight for. Perhaps it is time we learned." Dr. Velen had thrown himself into studying the awakened ships, his scientific curiosity overcoming his initial shock at humanity's elevation. His research was providing crucial insights into how the Gardener network operated, and what humanity would need to know to use it wisely. But not all of the alien reactions had been positive. The Zephyrian Consortium had attempted to claim several awakening Gardener ships by force, believing that their advanced technology gave them the right to control the vessels. They had learned quickly that the ships would respond only to humans, and their attempts at technological domination had resulted in the complete shutdown of the vessels they tried to seize. The Thorian Empire had gone even further, launching military strikes against human settlements near known Gardener sites. They had believed that eliminating the humans would give them access to the ships. Instead, they had discovered that the Gardener vessels had defensive capabilities that made their war fleets look like toys. Marcus felt each of these conflicts through the network that connected all the awakened ships. The consciousness he shared with his vessel was patient and forgiving, but it would not allow the galaxy's younger species to destroy what the original gardeners had spent millions of years creating. "They are afraid," the ship's voice whispered in his mind. "They have built their civilizations on the belief that might and technology determine worth. The idea that gentleness and patience might be more valuable qualities frightens them." Marcus understood. He had seen the same fear in the eyes of his former co-workers when they realized that the human they had mocked possessed knowledge and power beyond their comprehension. It was easier to believe that the universe rewarded aggression and ambition than to accept that the meek might indeed inherit the stars. But not all of the galaxy's inhabitants were struggling with fear and pride. Many species were embracing the new reality with wonder and hope. They had always known that their civilizations owed their existence to some greater force, and the revelation that the gardeners had been real brought a sense of meaning to their history that they had never possessed before. The Centauri Collective, a peaceful alliance of small worlds, had been among the first to offer their assistance to the awakening human gardeners. They understood that the return of the shepherds meant protection and guidance for species that had always struggled to survive. In a hostile galaxy, Marcus received daily reports from the growing network of gardener ships. Famine worlds were being transformed into gardens. Diseases that had killed billions were being cured. Wars that had raged for centuries were being ended through the patient intervention of humans who understood that sometimes the best way to win a fight was to help both sides remember what they were really fighting. For the ship showed him visions of the galaxy's future, a time when every world would flourish under the gentle guidance of the new gardeners. It would not be a tyranny of human dominance, but a partnership between all species working toward the common good. But that future was still distant. The network was incomplete, with dozens of gardener ships still sleeping in the void, waiting for the right human to find them. And the humans who were awakening the vessels were not trained leaders or military commanders. They were ordinary people who had to learn on the job how to guide civilizations. Marcus had become their teacher and coordinator, using the ship's communication network to share knowledge and provide guidance to his fellow gardeners. It was a role he had never expected to play, but one that felt as natural as breathing. "Are we ready for this?" he asked the ship during one of their quiet conversations. "Are we really capable of doing what the original gardeners did?" The ship's response filled him with warmth and confidence. "You're asking the right questions," it told him. "That alone proves you are ready. The original gardeners were not perfect. They made mistakes and learned from them. You will do the same. The difference is that you will not be alone. You have each other." As if to prove the ship's point, Marcus felt the presence of his fellow human gardeners through the network, Sarah's compassion as she healed the wounded on a dozen worlds, Tom's joy as he watched dead soil come to life under his care, dozens of others, each bringing their own gifts to the great work of tending the galaxy's garden. Marcus smiled and turned his attention back to the star charts displayed before him. There were still ships to awaken, still humans to find and guide to their destiny. The work would never be finished, but that was as it should be. Gardens needed constant care, and gardeners who truly loved their work never wanted to retire. In the depths of space, the great ship that had been dismissed as worthless junk continued its patient journey toward the galactic core. Behind it, a growing fleet of awakened vessels followed, each crewed by a human who had been underestimated by those who should have known better. The galaxy had mocked the old mechanic for believing in the impossible. Now they whispered his name with the reverence once reserved for gods, and they were beginning to understand that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their weapons. It was their refusal to give up on broken things, their ability to see potential where others saw only failure, and their understanding that the most important work in the universe was often the simplest, taking care of each other and nurturing the garden they all shared. Marcus Chen, the mechanic who had become a gardener of stars, smiled as he guided his ship toward the next world that needed healing. The work was just beginning, and he had never been happier.